Well, that was unexpected. Yep. Hello, everyone, and if you didn't know, today is, well, probably Thursday, because this video is going to push back another Reforge gaming video that I happen to have, and that video is going to sound very weird, but obviously this is what I get for making videos a week in advance. Oh well. That video still holds up, and will still be probably releasing on my Saturday day, because I'm starting to upload like 3 times a week now, I guess, so whatever. In any case, I think that today we're going to talk about Palworld, and let me just say, this game, to me, at least, is good. It's dumb, it's stupid, it looks very janky and has some weird animation and weird glitches, but it's good. Like, how good? Well, I decided to record a little bit of this, and that recording lasted 40 minutes. I meant to only record for about, 20 of that. I also decided to just hop on for, an hour to just get some footage for stuff. That was 3 hours. And then I missed an entire live stream. So, yeah. Overall, I think that the game itself is just a fun, engaging romp, but will probably get DMCA'd. Maybe, though I'm unsure at this point. But it made all the money, and to be clear, it hit 1 million concurrent players on Steam, which I have never seen a game in my lifetime hit that number. That's kind of insane. I also feel a little bit sick, so if I sound a little bit weird or burpy or something like that, just blame the sickness on it. But of course, not everyone is happy with this. The most important people that are not happy with this are actually the Sony fanboys, but we're not talking about the Sony fanboys today, because I know one person who just would make the best content in this context, that being the Nintendo, I'm not gonna say it himself, but it's the other thing, Harman Smith. In any case, yeah, I think that'll do it. Again, like I said, 1K subscribers, hit that subscribe button down below, that'll be very helpful, and it should be released, Visions Beyond should have been released sometime this week. If not, it will probably release Sunday, so yeah, sorry if I mess up days. Anyway, so let's get into started how Palworld apparently explodes onto Pretendo's stuff, and Harman is not happy.
So last night I did a warning stream talking about Palworld, the game that the indie YouTube scene is pretending is gonna be the Pokemon killer. It's gonna be some big thing. It has 500,000 concurrent players on Steam. It's sold over 1 million copies. It's over for the Pokemon company. It's over for Nintendo, right? I talked about what people were gonna do. And, yeah, I was right. All day long, we were bombarded with ridiculous notions that, oh, this game is a masterpiece. Oh, look at me play this game. Oh, look at how great it is. And now that the hype session is over, much like Temtem before it, the game is completely forgotten. It is dwindling in popularity. More and more people are starting to notice, what's going on. The game is being shilled. YouTubers aren't exactly the biggest advocates for game quality anyway, right? They just jump onto trends, right? So with that in mind, with what's been going on,
with that in mind and with what's been going on, let's look at the actual facts here. The tweet that I actually might have put onto the screen before, that being of the official Palworld place, they apparently made they apparently put out at least 3 million copies, I think, at least on Steam alone, and with Steam having over 1 million concurrent players. I was definitely one of them. I managed to play this game for 8 hours, and unfortunately, it was just really fun that I, again, lost track of time. Again, I have an entire, 40 minutes of uncut gameplay sitting on my hard drive, and that's kind of ridiculous that it was that long. I really should delete that. I might use it for other videos. But yeah, I'm also going to obviously use it for this because it just makes the most funny sense to be made in this. So if you see Palworld content in this, I'm not going to be using it all that much because I'm just going to be playing it in my off time. But I might use it in some other stuff just to piss people off because I think it's funny.
What can we learn from this, right? What can we learn from this experience? Well, first of all, it doesn't seem to be possible to use the same kind of techniques to prop up a game like this that the industry uses for Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever, right? Because Overwatch had a similar kind of thing where people came out and they tried screaming about, oh man, there are no colorful online shooters in this market. Overwatch is completely unique in this regard. And then meanwhile, like Splatoon came out last year, was better put together, like remained relevant longer, right? Was more unique and creative and had more interesting characters, right? Splatoon stomped Overwatch in every single way, shape, and form. But for the first 10 years, almost, yeah, about half that long, about 5 years. For the first several years, people were saying the exact opposite. Until Overwatch completely fell off a cliff, people were saying Overwatch was this big phenomenon. 40 million players online at once or something like that. It's one of the most popular things ever. Well, if it was so popular, it wouldn't have fallen off the way it did.
Well, there's actually more context to it than that, Harman. I think the biggest amount of context that you can actually do that is the sheer fact that it was Blizzard that made that game. Now, that's not a drag against Blizzard, because Activision Blizzard does actually make good games sometimes, but in that context, the thing that really made Overwatch kind of fall off a cliff was, number one, the lack of content for like a year-ish for an online-only game, and then Overwatch 2 completely and utterly fucking everything over. Not only fucking everything over in a way, but fucking everything over in a way that, like, didn't make the game feel the same and actually made the game worse, because it then went free to play, and then it eventually came to Steam, where it was then bombarded with a whole bunch of stuff. And let me just be honest here, Overwatch itself, when it originally came out, was actually more innovative than a lot of people think that it was. And again, when you put it into context, it was actually a very creative shooter, at least at the time. The hero shooter had never been a thing before. So, yeah. But overall, like, that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it was a trending game, and trends too tend to die. Now, again, there is another trendy game that was actually out here that managed to make a comeback, that being Minecraft. Minecraft is another example of a game that had a huge peak in popularity, but then kind of fell off a cliff somewhere, but then is making a resurgence. That can happen with certain games, like Team Fortress 2 and stuff, but it does take years, and it does take a certain amount of devs to do so. Again, overall, what you're saying is not entirely incorrect, but the context is different than what you're actually talking about here. And in fact, yes, the reason why it was considered a very innovative shooter was because it was considered a hero shooter. Now, would I say that it outlasted Splatoon? I mean, Splatoon got more sequels, sure, but I don't remember many people even talking or playing Splatoon. Like 1, 2, or 3. Did they make a 4? I don't know. But I don't remember much in terms of that, so it's just very odd.
Wouldn't have fallen off the way it did. Okay? Like, I don't understand what's so hard to understand about this. And meanwhile, like, Splatoon is still going. And to this day, people will try to do this thing that, like, Blizzard made all these mistakes, like, Overwatch was popular at one point, blah, 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 blah. But no. What actually happened is that you latched onto a trend and began supporting that trend. You began feeding into the beast. You were part of the process.
I mean, it kind of was. I think, did it win Game of the Year? I can't remember. But it was definitely an okay game, and I remember having a lot of fun with it. One thing that I would also like to say about this, and just mention this right now, the camera angle in this is so annoying to me, because majority of the screen, like, I know thirds is a thing, but the majority of the screen in this is just taken up by his, like, walls and shit. And I know that I took this off of, like, some weird crunchy bit, so it might look a little crunchy in the thing, but, like, gross. Just fix your fucking camera. Jesus Christ.
Of pretending this game was some Game of the Year contender, right? When in reality, it wasn't really relevant in any way, shape, or form. Overwatch is a really interesting example, because right now you can't even go back and play the Overwatch that people supposedly liked. That was the thing with World of Warcraft.
I mean, WoW Classic is actually pretty popular and, is still actually getting support. Plus, when they did bring out WoW Classic, it kind of made the game better in some regards, because it didn't have all the fluff and nonsense. But Overwatch 2 was definitely mishandled, because they shut down the original Overwatch and transferred everyone over to Overwatch 2, which not a lot of people wanted. So it's like
that, like, people thought that, like, if we just go back to WoW Classic, it'll be good again. But that didn't happen, right? Because the game was never good to begin with. It was just a new, novel thing to you at the time, and you got tired of it. And you don't want to admit it, right? You don't want to admit that the game wasn't that good to begin with. So you kind of jump through hoops and make excuses and kind of justify your attitude. You kind of justify why you act this way about these products. You kind of
take your time. You got this. Use your brain.
Justify why things are becoming so... why these games are forgotten so quickly, right? Like Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3. Like, long term, these games are not going to be relevant. You know, Elden Ring is already trailing behind Dark Souls in best games ever made polls, right? Elden Ring is never going to be more popular than Dark Souls. Just like Dark Souls is never going to be more popular than Skyrim. And just like how Skyrim is never going to be more popular than Zelda, right? Like, there is really nothing you can do, right, about to establish to demolish these established Nintendo properties, right? By saying that like Palworld is going to like beat Pokemon, you would have to have a TCG, you would have to have a merchandise line, you would have to have.
I mean, again, sold 3 million copies in around 8 hours, had over 1 million people on Steam concurrently at one time. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It might just like die off eventually because most multiplayer games of this nature do tend to die off eventually. But at the very least, it made a fuck ton of money just off of the video games itself alone. What I would also like to mention as well, again, is that this was mainly exclusively on Xbox and PC. Imagine if this had like a bunch of other platforms to be on. And yeah, certainly. I think that the one big thing that they can't really do is actually make a merchandise line or an actual anime, from what I can tell. But overall, like, does it need it, though? It just made, like, all the money, like, ever. It's ridiculous.
You know, an anime adaptation, you would have to have, like, all of this stuff, right? All of these highly successful, lucrative products on top of the video game franchise, right? And whatever you think about the video game franchise right now, like, there's no denying that Pokemon is actually doing quite a bit better in those other avenues, right? Because I would have said before Gen 8, like, before Dexit, like, the big controversial thing people had about the brand was how the anime was being treated. How they didn't retire Ash and how they weren't, like, really evolving the formula and how, like, it was in this weird spot. Like, old fans didn't want to keep watching it, but new ones weren't really coming in.
That has nothing to do with the games or anything that we had to talk about. That had to do with just the anime and the anime alone. What's also weird about that point is the sheer fact that people do actually have problems with a lot of the games. And most recently, a lot of the games actually did have, like, game-breaking glitches and bugs on the Nintendo Switch from what I can remember. I mean, do you remember the stretchy people? Because I remember the stretchy people. Pepperidge Farm remembers the stretchy people.
And so they decided to finally retire Ash as a character and bring in some new people and, like, finally get some fresh blood in there and finally get some more creative storytelling and finally do some more things. Like years ago, the anime was in trouble. But then, like, the games picked up the slack now, and now with, like, the games kind of being attacked by these pretendos, like, the anime is kind of stepping up. You know, the TCG is stepping up. You know, like, the mobile apps are stepping up. Like, there is no way in the world that Palworld, like a glitchy, uninspired, you know, straight up plagiarized mess, is ever going to topple Pokemon. And
yeah, and also with guns. Like, straight up with just, like, it's fun. If you haven't already, look at this game's like 10% off on Steam. Go and buy it. I recommend it. Fully and utterly. It's great.
And that was obvious to me from the beginning, before I even looked at what the game was and what it was like. And before I started realizing that, like, wow, these are just Pokemon designs with, like, different typings and different colors, right? like, before I realized how, like, blatant it was, right? Like, I was saying that, like, this is another Temtem. This is another Yokai Watch. This is another Digimon. You know, a flash-in-the-pan thing that's relevant because, like, people desperately need Pokemon to go away so they can start claiming that Nintendo is doomed, but, like, it just isn't happening. Like, Pokemon, it's interesting because it's not just the fact that it's so entrenched and so popular. Like, Pokemon is...
I mean, that's kind of true. I agree with that. The toppling Pokemon by doing the exact same thing as Pokemon is not going to really do anything. Because, yeah, absolutely. I think that Pokemon is a very good, simplistic RPG that can really be cool. And it has really cool monsters doing really cool attacks and moves and stuff, and it has inspiring imagination. So I will give you that. That's 100% correct. However, I think that Palworld doing something differently is funny. Because, again, we're making this big connection between Palworld and Pokemon, and yet we're missing the fact that it's not that. Which is the weird thing. It's a ripoff of both Tears of the Kingdom and Pokemon. See, completely different. Like, very, very different. It has, like, a lot of the gameplay elements from a survival crafting of, say, again, Tears of the Kingdom with the Pokemon Collectathon that is the PALs. And it even has, like, Tears of the Kingdom style bosses and stuff like that. And it's even got a little bit of a Dark Souls in there somewhat with, like, dodge rolling and stuff. I need to figure out how to dodge roll because, god damn it, I get fucked over by that boss. But overall, like, you see what I mean here. It's a very interesting game, and again, a lot of people are putting it against Pokemon as like the next big Pokemon thing. But I mean, it's technically speaking attacking from two fronts, with Pokemon on one end and Link, and the Tears of the Kingdom on the other, and it kind of mixes the two together. And again, that's kind of why I like it, because it's very weird, but it's very fun. Also, again, it has like that whole early access thing, but I don't give a shit.
It's so popular. Like, Pokemon is completely dominant in its niche, right? In a lot of ways, like, I said this on my stream, like, I don't think you're ever going to topple Pokemon by doing the same thing as it is, right? Looking at Palworld and seeing the designs and seeing, like, the monsters and the typings and just, like, the way the world is set up and stuff.
And also shoot guns. You can also just give them, like, pew-pews and stuff, and like you can give them that, that's a thing. You can give them that. You can put one on your head with like an SMG, and he will fire for you. Like, you can get one of them having a death machine. It like, that's one of the reasons why I think it's funny, and I really like it.
Things and just like the way the world is set up and stuff like that. Like, it's all just very Pokemon-esque, right? But they're not doing anything new with it, and they're not doing anything uninspired with it. Like, they're not doing anything inspired with it. Like, it's just the same thing, but ooh, you can craft. Like, that's like the stupidest, like, most basic thing you can possibly add to a game like this. Is like, ooh, you can add crafting. You can make anything you want. Like, it's like, it's one of those, that kind of thing was being made fun of 10 years ago, right? And now look at us, right? Gamers are doing the same thing they've done for the last several years, is prop up random games from small Chinese companies that are just plagiarizing Nintendo IPs. You know, plagiarizing Zelda with Genshin Impact, plagiarizing Pokemon with a Palworld, you know, plagiarizing Animal Crossing, whatever, right? Like, it's the same thing over and over.
Are they? I mean, I don't think so. Other than, I'd say, like, Pokemon and maybe Mario in the platforming space, I don't think Nintendo really has that big of a dominance, if you really think about it. Again, this is more of a realistic-minded thing. I would say that Nintendo is good at what they do. Again, I'm not hating on Nintendo here. Nintendo is very good at what they do. Nintendo has been at this for, like, at least 100 years. They were at this since, like, the 1800s. Literally, look this up. They were like a playing card company. They know their shit. But again, Nintendo, to me, I think of things like Mario and Zelda and Link and stuff. And, like, absolutely, Pokemon's a part of that. And Pokemon is fun. But at the same time, if you, again, think about it, even though this might still be, like, one of those flash-in-the-pan games, it still made, like, all the money for some reason. And, again, whether it be just out of sheer spite, which is why I originally bought the game, but then wasted about 8 hours and a sleepless night over it, missing a live stream, which was hilarious to me, because I'd never do that. I then, like, I am so confused, but I love playing this game, and I want to play more of this game. I want to beat that boss. Please.
Over again, right? Nintendo is so dominant in these kind of spaces, you know, in anything that isn't a realistic first-person shooter or like a third-person action game where you go around killing the police, right? Like, anything that isn't that, like, Nintendo is dominant in. And, like, I don't think the rest of the industry is.
I mean, again, million players, sold 3 million, and then sold 3 million copies in 8 hours. 1 million concurrent players on Steam. Like, there's obviously demand. You're just so stupid. And again, even when this video was released, it said like 500,000. Like, that's still a huge number. Again, this was made like really weird. And again, obviously there is a demand for this, and it's just really weird that he's saying, "Oh, there's no demand," even though this made like all the money. So weird.
Is gonna ever be able to catch up by Pokemon by putting out a clone of it. Like, it isn't gonna work. Pokemon innovates too much. They're glitch free. They introduce new Pokemon every generation. Like, there fundamentally is no real demand for a Pokemon clone. You know, Dragon Quest Monsters was considered a huge success when it sold 1 million units. Meanwhile, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is selling like what? Like 25 million, right? And counting, plus the DLC, plus everything else that's happening, you know, plus the fact we're getting...
I mean, again, I would say that that's true. It would not ever really be eclipsed in this niche, but you can definitely take out a bit of the actual chunk of it. One of the more interesting things as well is that, again, this wasn't released on anything having to do with the Nintendo Switch, and probably for a good reason. But one other big thing about this whole situation is, again, the fact that it sold like hotcakes. Probably out of people just doing it out of spite. I know I did it out of spite, but then I was like, wasted 8 hours, like I said before, and was like, oh, shit, 6 a.m. Fuck, I gotta get to sleep. And was just having a blast just going through the entire game. Again, there's another 30 seconds here. I'm not gonna go through that because obviously he's just gonna repeat himself. But to kind of circle back just a little bit, he said that the game was not as glitchy. No, they're glitchy. They're pretty glitchy, depending on the version. Like some of the more recent stuff, it's pretty bad. But overall, again, just to go through his main points, it's obviously, yes, it's a ripoff of Pokemon, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Do I think that it'll be more popular than Pokemon? Probably not. It probably won't lead to an entire, like, revolution of, like, make Palworld do good and get an Palworld anime and stuff like that. Probably do, like, copyright stuff or whatever. Maybe. But, again, this is also, like, just a weird time that we live in. But to say that there's no demand for a game like this, especially on the platforms where it was released on, when the game in 8 hours sold 3 million copies, had the highest concurrent player count I've ever seen on a game, like, in my lifetime. It actually reached 1 million concurrent players on Steam at one time, which is insane. Like, absolutely bonkers insane. Right? And still is going to be selling pretty well for a feature-complete, albeit early access style game. For $30! I've already gotten 8 hours of content and 8 hours of enjoyment out of it, and I'm probably going to get more. I wouldn't say it's going to be in my rotation continuously. It might be in my rotation for a while, and then I might drop it for a bit to go play some other stuff because I'm more of a first-person shooter type of person. But regardless, this game is one of those games that I think, personally, I call it a podcast game. Now, there's a few of those out there. One of the other ones I can think of off the top of my head is like Unturned, which is like a super old Roblox-style DayZ type situation. And again, it was made by one dude, so I don't hold that against it. And that's not really a bad thing to say that. But here's one of the biggest things with that is that that's a podcast game. It's a game you can put a podcast on, listen to it for like an hour and a half, and then shut the game off. That's what I call a comfort podcast. And I think that this is going to fall into that comfort podcast game play type situation. So, anyway, I think that'll about do it for this video. If you like what it is that I do and want to drop me a like and subscribe, that'd be absolutely very much helpful. Try to hit 1K by the end of this year. Visions Beyond should be released by this week. By the time that this video comes out, if you want to listen to that, link to the Bandcamp down in the description below. I'll even try to see if I can link the video in the comments as well, if it's posted. And of course, thank you all so much for watching. My name is GamePenguin21. Harman, never change, and a peace. Off.